The year is 1842. We find ourselves situated upon a jagged, solitary finger of rock protruding from the churning, slate-gray depths of the North Atlantic, several miles off the rugged coastline of Maine. Here, the world is defined not by the bustle of the mainland or the complexities of society, but by the steady, unyielding rhythm of the sea and the singular purpose of the great light. It is late afternoon in the deep heart of January. The sun, a pale and distant disk of frosted silver, hangs low on the horizon, casting long, ethereal shadows across the snow-dusted granite of the island. The air is crystalline, so cold that it seems to crackle with every breath. Yet here, within the thick masonry walls of the keeper's quarters, there is a profound and heavy silence, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a tall, mahogany-cased regulator clock standing against the far wall. You are the keeper of this light. Your world is small, circular, and meticulously ordered. As you sit by the small iron stove in the kitchen, you feel the gentle, radiating heat seeping through the thick layers of your heavy wool knit sweater. The wool is coarse but comforting, smelling faintly of cedar and wood smoke. You watch a single bead of condensation as it forms on the window pane, a tiny orb of liquid that slowly, almost imperceptibly, tracks its way down the glass through a thin veil of frost. Outside, the wind is a low, constant hum, a distant morning sound that only serves to emphasize the stillness of your sanctuary. It is nearly time to begin the evening ascent. This is a ritual performed with the same precision every day, a sequence of movements so familiar they have become a form of moving meditation. You stand slowly, the wooden chair legs making a soft, muffled scuff against the braided rag rug. You reach for your heavy brass key ring, the metal cool and substantial in your hand. The keys clink together with a dull, melodic chime, a sound that signals the transition from the domesticity of the day to the vigilance of the night. You move toward the heavy oak door that leads to the base of the tower. As you open it, the air changes. The warmth of the kitchen is replaced by the cool, damp scent of stone and lime. The lighthouse tower is a marvel of 19th century engineering, a tapering cylinder of granite blocks, each hand-hewn and perfectly fitted. You step onto the first stair. The staircase is a spiral of solid stone, winding its way upward into the dimness above. Step, the sound of your leather boot meeting the granite is a deep, resonant thud. Step, the echo travels up the central shaft, a soft vibration that you feel in the soles of your feet. Step, you run your hand along the smooth, cold surface of the interior wall. The stone is slightly damp to the touch, carrying the ancient chill of the ocean. As you climb, the world outside begins to fade. The only light comes from the small, narrow slit windows, embrasures cut deep into the masonry. Through them, you catch fleeting glimpses of the darkening sea. The water is no longer blue. It has turned a deep, bruised purple, crested with white foam that looks like lace against the darkening sky. You count the steps, not because you need to, but because the counting provides a rhythm to your thoughts. 1, 2, 3. The numbers are a silent mantra. By the time you reach the 30th step, your breathing has synchronized with your pace. The air is thinner here, and the sound of the wind outside begins to grow more pronounced, a steady, whistling drone that vibrates through the very bones of the tower. You reach the first landing, a small circular room where the spare supplies are kept. The air here smells of linseed oil, beeswax, and the sharp, metallic tang of brass polish. Everything is in its place. Rows of glass chimneys, polished to a mirror-like shine, sit nestled in wooden crates lined with soft flannel. Tins of high-grade whale oil are stacked neatly against the wall, their labels printed in elegant, fading copperplate script. You pause for a moment, simply breathing in the stillness of the room. There is a profound sense of security in this order. In a world of unpredictable storms and shifting tides, this room represents a constant, a space where every object has a purpose and a designated location. You pick up a small, clean linen cloth and a tin of polish. You will need these later. For now, you continue your ascent. The spiral tightens as you move higher. The stone steps give way to iron ones, which ring with a higher, more musical pitch under your boots. The vibration is different now, sharper, more urgent. You are approaching the lantern room, the crown of the tower. As you reach the final ladder, you feel the slight tremor of the tower as a particularly strong gust of wind brushes against its flank. It is not a frightening sensation. It is the feeling of a sturdy ship meeting a wave. The lighthouse is built to sway, to yield just enough to the elements so that it may never break. You climb the iron rungs, your hands gripping the cold metal, until your head clears the floor of the lantern room. Here, the light is different. The sun has finally dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a narrow ribbon of burning orange and deep crimson at the edge of the world. The rest of the sky is a deep, velvety indigo, transitioning into the blackness of the coming night. The lantern room is a cage of glass and iron, dominated by the massive Fresnel lens. This lens is a masterpiece of glasswork, a series of concentric prisms that capture the light and focus it into a single, powerful beam. It looks like a giant, shimmering jewel, catching the last remnants of the twilight and fracturing them into 1,000 tiny rainbows. You move to the center of the room where the lamp assembly sits. The smell of oil is stronger here, a thick, nourishing scent that speaks of warmth and light. You begin the process of preparing the wicks. This is a task that requires a steady hand and a calm mind. You carefully trim the charred ends of the wicks with a pair of sharp brass shears. The snip, snip of the blades is a crisp, satisfying sound in the quiet room. You must ensure the wicks are perfectly level. Even the slightest irregularity would cause the flame to flicker or produce soot, which would dim the brilliance of the lens. Once the wicks are trimmed, you check the oil reservoirs. You unscrew the heavy brass cap, the threads turning with a smooth, oiled resistance. You peer inside, seeing the dark, viscous liquid. Using a long-necked funnel, you begin to pour the oil from a smaller canister. The sound of the oil glugging into the reservoir is a thick, rhythmic melody. Glug, 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 a liquid heartbeat for the light. You watch as the level rises, stopping just before it reaches the brim. You replace the cap and tighten it, feeling the satisfying thunk as it seats home. Now the moment of ignition. You strike a long wooden match against the striking plate. The flare of the match is sudden and bright, casting long, flickering shadows against the glass walls. You hold the flame to the wicks. They catch slowly, the fire creeping across the fabric until a steady, golden glow fills the lamp. You carefully adjust the height of the wicks, watching as the flame stabilizes into a bright, unwavering cone of light. You then step back and engage the clockwork mechanism that rotates the lens. You wind the heavy iron crank, a task that requires your full strength. The ratcheting sound, clack, 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 fills the room, a mechanical rhythm that echoes the ticking of the clock far below in the kitchen. As you wind, the heavy weights are lifted high into the tower, storing the energy that will turn the lens throughout the night. Finally, you release the brake. With a low, grinding groan of metal on metal, the massive lens begins to move. It rotates slowly, majestically. As it turns, the prisms catch the light of the lamp and project it outward. A great, sweeping arm of white light cuts through the darkness, reaching out miles across the black water. You watch it for a moment, the rhythmic pulse of the light passing over you, light, then shadow, then light again. The rhythm is hypnotic. The flash of the light occurs every 15 seconds. You find yourself counting the seconds in the silence. 1, 2, 3. The light sweeps past. 10, 11, 12. The shadows return. It is a slow, pulsing breath of light that signals to the world that someone is here, someone is watching, and the way is clear. You take a seat on a small wooden stool in the corner of the lantern room. From here, you can see the entire horizon. The stars are beginning to emerge, pinpricks of cold fire in the vast black dome of the sky. The Milky Way is a faint, ethereal smear of light, like a dusting of flour across a dark table. You feel a sense of immense solitude, but it is not a lonely feeling. It is a feeling of being a small but essential part of a vast, mechanical universe. The temperature in the lantern room is lower than below, but the heat from the lamp provides a localized warmth. You pull your collar up around your neck. The task for the next several hours is simply to watch. To watch the light, to watch the sea, and to watch the passage of time. You take your linen cloth and begin to polish the brass housing of the lamp. The movement is circular and repetitive. You focus on a single spot, rubbing the metal until it reflects the golden glow of the flame with a deep, lustrous shine. The sound of the cloth against the brass is a soft, rhythmic hiss-hiss, hiss-hiss. It is the only sound in the room besides the ticking of the rotation mechanism and the distant, muffled roar of the surf against the rocks below. The world is reduced to this small circle of light and the endless, dark horizon. Your mind begins to drift, wandering through memories of the day, the taste of the morning porridge, the feel of the cold wind when you went out to check the cistern, the way the snow looked like powdered sugar on the black rocks. These thoughts are not hurried. They move with the same slow, deliberate pace as the rotating lens. As the first hour of your watch passes, you notice the way the frost is beginning to bloom in delicate, fern-like patterns on the corners of the glass panes. The patterns are intricate and beautiful, a silent architecture of the cold. You watch as they grow, crystal by crystal, encroaching slowly toward the center of the glass. You know that later, you will have to scrape them away to ensure the light remains unobstructed. But for now, you simply admire their slow, frozen progress. The sea below is a constant, shifting presence. You cannot see the waves clearly in the dark, but you can hear them. A low, rhythmic thumping, like the beating of a giant heart. Occasionally, a larger wave will hit the base of the island with a dull boom that vibrates through the entire tower, a reminder of the immense power that surrounds your small, sturdy home. You reach into your pocket and find a small piece of dried apple. You chew it slowly, savoring the tart, concentrated sweetness. The act of eating is a grounding experience, a reminder of the physical world. You take a sip of water from a tin canteen, the liquid cold and refreshing. Every sensation is heightened by the silence and the darkness. The light continues its steady rotation. Flash, dark, flash, dark. The rhythm is becoming a part of you, a heartbeat that exists outside of your own body. You feel your eyelids growing heavy, but you do not sleep. You simply sink deeper into the stillness, a state of wakeful rest where the boundaries between your thoughts and the environment begin to blur. You are the keeper of the light, and the light is the keeper of the night. Everything is as it should be. The wicks are burning brightly. The lens is turning smoothly. The oil is flowing steadily. In this moment, in this isolated tower in the middle of the winter sea, there is a perfect, unshakable peace. You settle back on your stool, your eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for the next sweep of the light to illuminate the dark, waiting for the slow, inevitable progression of the night. The clockwork ticks on. The wind hums its low, constant tune. And the great light breathes its steady, golden breath into the cold, silent air. The hour has turned, marked by the steady, unhurried progression of the regulator clock far below, its pulse vibrating faintly through the granite bones of the tower. Here, in the lantern room, the air has grown slightly heavier with the scent of burning oil, a rich, toasted aroma that carries a hint of salt and ancient depths. You stand from your wooden stool, the movement slow and deliberate, feeling the familiar stiffness in your joints that comes from the damp winter chill. Your boots make a soft, rhythmic creak against the iron floor plating, a sound that is quickly swallowed by the vast, encompassing silence of the Atlantic night. It is time for the first maintenance check of the night cycle. You approach the massive Fresnel lens, its glass surfaces shimmering like the scales of a great prehistoric fish. You take up your polishing cloth once more, a piece of well-worn flannel that has been softened by years of use. You begin at the base of the lower prisms. The glass is cool, almost biting to the touch, but as you work, the friction of your hand creates a localized warmth. You focus on a single triangular prism. You move the cloth in a slow, clockwise motion. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The sound is hypnotic, a soft friction that fills the small space. You watch as a tiny smudge, perhaps a speck of soot or a dried salt crystal, gradually vanishes under the steady pressure of your thumb. Behind the glass, the golden flame of the lamp flickers gently, magnified and distorted by the geometry of the lens into a broad, brilliant ribbon of light. You move to the next prism and then the next. There are hundreds of them, each one requiring your attention. You do not rush. Time here is not measured in minutes, but in the slow completion of these essential tasks. As you work your way around the circumference of the lens, you notice the way the light interacts with the iron framework. The shadows cast by the astragals, the vertical bars of the lantern room, sweep across the floor and walls in a rhythmic dance. 1, 2, 3. The shadow passes over your boots. 10, 11, 12. It returns. You find yourself timing your polishing strokes to the rotation of the light. Reach, rub, release. Reach, rub, release. The repetition is soothing, a physical mantra that clears the mind of all but the immediate present. Once the lower prisms are polished to your satisfaction, you turn your attention to the brass fittings of the lamp itself. The metal is warm, nearly hot, from the proximity of the flame. You apply a small amount of polishing paste from a tin, the scent of it sharp and chemical, cutting through the heavy smell of the oil. You rub the paste into the brass until it forms a dull, gray haze. Then you buff it away with a clean section of the flannel. Underneath, the brass emerges with a deep, liquid glow, reflecting the flickering flame in a way that makes the metal seem to pulse with a life of its own. You pause for a moment to check the wicks. They are burning with a steady, even light, the edges of the flame a deep, translucent blue that transitions into a brilliant, sun-like yellow. There is no flicker, no stutter. The oil is being drawn up through the cotton fibers with perfect efficiency. You take a small brass pick and gently nudge a stray fiber back into the flame, watching as it is instantly consumed. The precision of the lamp is a source of quiet pride. In the darkness of the winter ocean, this small flame is a beacon of order and human intent. The wind has shifted slightly, now coming from the northeast. You can hear it singing through the ventilation cowls atop the lantern gallery, a high, mournful whistle that sounds like a distant flute. It is a lonely sound, yet it serves to make the interior of the lantern room feel even more secure, even more like a sanctuary. You step out onto the gallery for a brief moment to check the exterior glass. As you open the small iron door, the cold hits you like a physical weight. It is a dry, searing cold that catches in your throat and makes the moisture on your eyelashes begin to freeze instantly. The sound of the ocean is much louder here, a chaotic, crashing roar as the swell breaks against the northern ledges. You can feel the fine spray of salt water on the wind, a cold mist that coats your face. You move quickly along the narrow walkway, your hand trailing along the iron railing. The metal is so cold it feels sticky against your wool mittens. You examine the glass panes of the lantern. They are clear of ice for now, the heat from the lamp within keeping the frost at bay. You look out into the darkness. There is nothing to see but the great, sweeping arm of the light as it illuminates the white caps for a brief second before plunging them back into obsidian blackness. The horizon is gone, swallowed by the void. You are truly at the edge of the world. Returning inside, the warmth of the lantern room feels like a heavy blanket. You secure the door, the iron latch clicking into place with a definitive metallic sound. You take a deep breath, the air smelling of oil and old stone. Your lungs expand, warmed by the interior atmosphere. It is now time to check the clockwork mechanism. You kneel on the floor and open the small wooden access panel. Inside, the brass gears are turning with a slow, majestic inevitability. You can see the escapement wheel, tick, 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 each tooth releasing with a precise, rhythmic snap. You apply a single drop of fine clock oil to the main spindle, watching as the clear liquid is drawn into the bearing. The movement of the gears is a testament to human ingenuity, a complex dance of mathematics and metal that keeps the light turning through the longest of nights. You check the height of the weights. They have descended about a third of the way down the central shaft of the tower. You decide to give the crank a few turns to maintain the tension. You fit the heavy iron handle onto the square stud and begin to wind. Clack, clack, clack. The sound is deep and resonant, echoing down the hollow core of the lighthouse. You feel the weight of the stones in your muscles, the resistance of gravity being overcome by the leverage of the gears. It is a satisfying physical task. With each turn, You are storing the energy required to guide sailors home. Once the weights are reset, you prepare for the descent back to the living quarters. You gather your cloth and polished tin, placing them neatly back into your supply basket. You take one last look around the lantern room. Everything is in order. The light is steady. The gears are humming. The frost is held at bay. You step onto the first rung of the iron ladder and begin your downward journey. The transition from the brilliant, golden light of the lantern room to the dim shadows of the tower is gradual. As you descend, the air grows cooler and the scent of the sea becomes more pronounced. You reach the stone stairs and begin the long, winding walk down the spiral. Step, the sound of your boot on the granite is a hollow, rhythmic thud. Step. The cold of the stone walls seems to seep through your clothing, a reminder of the immense mass of the tower. Step. You pass the narrow slit windows, seeing the rhythmic flash of the light from above as it reflects off the spray and the distant waves. The descent is a time for reflection. You think about the woodpile in the shed, wondering if you should bring in another armload before the snow deepens. You think about the barrel of salted flour in the larder and the small jar of honey you have been saving for a particularly cold night. These thoughts are small and manageable, a way of grounding yourself in the domestic reality of your life. You reach the base of the tower and enter the transition passage that leads to the keeper's cottage. The air here is still and smells of dry wood and old paper. You move into the kitchen, where the embers in the stove are still glowing a deep, pulsing red. The room is dim, lit only by the faint light of the stove and the pale moonlight filtering through the window. You move to the heavy oak desk in the corner. This is where the official logbook resides, a thick, leather-bound volume with pages of heavy, cream-colored parchment. You sit in the spindleback chair, the wood creaking softly under your weight. You reach for your inkwell, a heavy square of cut glass, and unscrew the silver cap. The ink inside is dark and lustrous, a pool of liquid shadow. You take up your quill, a sturdy goose feather that you have sharpened yourself. You dip the tip into the ink, feeling the slight resistance of the fluid. You pause for a moment, letting the excess ink drip back into the well. Then, you begin to write. January 14th, 1842, 10:00 p.m. Wind NE moderate, sky clear, stars visible, light burning steady and bright, oil consumption normal, lantern glass clear of ice, all remains well. The sound of the quill scratching across the parchment is a crisp, rhythmic sound, scritch, scritch, scritch. The ink goes on wet and glistening, catching the light from the stove before it slowly soaks into the fibers of the paper and turns a matte, permanent black. You take a small shaker of fine sand and sprinkle it over the writing to blot the excess ink. You then tip the sand back into the shaker, the tiny grains making a soft, shushing sound as they slide across the paper. You close the logbook with a soft, heavy thud. The record is complete. Another hour of the night has been accounted for. You stand and move to the stove. You pick up the small iron poker and gently stir the coals. A cascade of tiny, orange sparks erupts from the embers, dancing briefly in the air before vanishing into the flue. You take a single, thick log of seasoned oak from the wood box. The bark is rough and textured, smelling of the forest and the earth. You place it carefully onto the coals, watching as the heat begins to blister the wood. A thin curl of white smoke rises, followed by a sudden bright lick of blue flame as the gases ignite. You close the stove door, the iron latch snapping shut with a familiar metallic snick. You decide to make a pot of tea. You move to the cast iron kettle sitting on the back of the stove. You lift it, feeling its substantial weight. You carry it to the water barrel in the corner and use a wooden ladle to fill it. The sound of the water splashing into the kettle is a bright, musical sound. Plink, plonk, splash. You return the kettle to the hottest part of the stove and wait. The kitchen is a place of profound comfort. You look at the objects on the shelves, the pewter plates, the ceramic mugs, the small tin of tea leaves. Each object has its place, its history. You notice a small chip in the rim of your favorite mug, a souvenir of a clumsy morning years ago. You trace the line of the chip with your finger, feeling the smooth, glazed surface. As the kettle begins to heat, a low, rhythmic hum starts to emanate from the metal. It grows slowly in pitch, a steady vibration that signals the approaching boil. You take a small pinch of tea leaves from the tin, the dried leaves feeling brittle and papery between your fingers. You drop them into the ceramic teapot, hearing them hit the bottom with a tiny, dry rustle. The kettle begins to whistle, a soft, breathy sound that gradually builds into a clear, steady note. You lift the kettle, the steam rising in a thick white plume that smells of iron and heat. You pour the water into the teapot, the liquid swirling around the leaves and releasing their dark, earthy aroma. You replace the lid and wrap the teapot in a thick wool cozy, another layer of insulation against the night. You sit back down at the table and wait for the tea to steep. You listen to the ticking of the regulator clock. Tock, tock, tock. It is the heartbeat of the house, a constant reminder of the steady passage of time. The wind continues its low, mournful song outside, but here, by the warmth of the stove, with the scent of tea filling the air, you feel a sense of absolute peace. The minutes pass slowly. You watch the way the shadows from the stove move across the floor. You watch the frost on the window pane, seeing how the warmth of the kitchen is causing the edges of the ice crystals to soften and blur. Your mind is quiet, empty of worry or expectation. You are simply existing in this moment, a small point of consciousness in the vast, winter night. Finally, you pour yourself a cup of tea. The liquid is a deep amber color, steam rising from the surface in delicate, swirling patterns. You hold the mug in both hands, feeling the warmth of the ceramic seeping into your palms. You take a slow, cautious sip. The tea is hot and bitter, with a faint, smoky aftertaste that lingers on your tongue. It is deeply satisfying, a simple pleasure that feels like a luxury in this isolated place. You sit in the silence, sipping your tea and watching the firelight. The world outside is cold and dark and vast, but here, inside the thick granite walls of the lighthouse, there is warmth and light and order. You are the keeper of the light, and for this hour the world is at peace. The rhythm of the night continues, the ticking clock, the turning lens, the breathing sea. And you in the center of it all are perfectly, safely bored. The final dreg of tea in your ceramic mug has grown lukewarm, a small, dark pool reflecting the dying embers of the hearth. You tip the mug back, feeling the slight silt of the tea leaves against your tongue, a bitter and earthy conclusion to your brief respite. You set the mug down on the heavy pine table. The sound is a soft, muffled clack against the wood, a noise that seems to ripple outward into the quiet corners of the kitchen. You remain seated for a moment, your hands resting flat on the tabletop. The wood is old, its surface a landscape of fine cracks, smooth divots, and the deep, dark stains of decades of domestic life. You trace the grain with your index finger, a slow, wandering journey along a line of growth that began perhaps a century before you were born. The texture is varied. Here it is as smooth as polished bone. There it is slightly raised, a ridge of harder summer wood that resisted the wear of the years. It is now time to perform the nightly inventory of the larder. This is not a task born of necessity. You know precisely what remains in your stores, but it is a task born of discipline. In the isolation of the Maine winter, order is the primary defense against the encroaching chaos of the wild sea. You stand, your knees giving a faint, rhythmic pop in the stillness. You take up your small hand lantern, a simple brass frame with panes of horn that diffuse the light into a warm, amber glow. You strike a match, the sulphurous scent briefly sharp in the air, and light the small wick. The flame is steady, a tiny, captive star that you carry with you into the cooler reaches of the house. You walk toward the pantry door. The floorboards beneath your boots are wide planks of spruce, secured with hand-forged iron nails. With every step there is a distinct, predictable groan from the timber, a familiar language of the house. Creak, groan, snap. You know exactly which boards will speak and which will remain silent. You reach the pantry door, a stout construction of vertical slats. The latch is a simple thumb piece of wrought iron, cold and smooth from the touch of many hands. You press it down. The mechanism moves with a heavy, oiled clack, and the door swings open on hinges that you personally greased with tallow only 3 days ago. They are silent, moving with a ghostly, effortless grace. The air in the pantry is significantly cooler than that of the kitchen. It smells of dried herbs, salted meat, burlap, and the faint, sweet tart aroma of winter apples stored in barrels of sawdust. It is a dense, nourishing smell, the scent of survival. You hold your lantern high, its amber light washing over the shelves. The shadows of the jars and tins stretch out across the whitewashed walls, long and distorted like the fingers of a giant. You begin your count at the bottom shelf. Here sit the heavy stoneware crocks, their glazes a deep, mottled brown. One contains salt pork, submerged in a thick, translucent brine. You can see the cloudy depths of the liquid through the neck of the jar. You place your hand on the cool ceramic, feeling its immense thermal mass. Beside it is the crock of sauerkraut, the fermentation providing a faint, sharp tang that cuts through the heavier scents of the room. You check the seals, your fingers tracing the wax-covered twine that secures the muslin covers. Everything is tight, everything is secure. Moving upward, your light illuminates the rows of glass jars. Here are the preserves of the previous autumn, beets stained a deep royal purple, pale, translucent onions bobbing in vinegar, and thick golden applesauce that seems to glow from within when the lantern light hits it. You count them one by one, your lips moving in a silent, rhythmic tally. 1, 2, 3. The glass is cool and smooth under your fingertips. You notice a small bubble of air trapped in a jar of pickled carrots, a tiny, silver sphere suspended in the orange depths. You watch it for a moment, captivated by its stillness, before moving on to the next shelf. The middle shelf holds the dry goods. There are 3 large tin canisters, their lids fitting with an airtight precision. You open the first one, the flour. The white powder is fine and soft, smelling of the sun and the fields of the mainland. You take a wooden scoop and level the surface, the flour making a soft, shushing sound as it shifts. The second canister contains sugar, the crystals coarse and glittering like unpolished diamonds in the lamplight. The third holds your supply of oats, a dry, papery rustle greeting you as you disturb the surface. You close the lids one by one, thump, thump, thump. The sound of the tin sealing is a definitive end to the count. Finally, you turn to the barrels in the corner. You tap the side of the flour barrel with your knuckles. Thud. The sound is deep and solid, indicating it is still more than half full. You move to the apple barrel. You reach in, your hand plunging into the cool, dry sawdust. Your fingers find the firm, waxy skin of a Baldwin apple. You pull it out, an orb of deep crimson that feels heavy and cold. You bring it to your nose, inhaling the concentrated essence of the orchard. It is a bright, clean scent that feels strangely out of place in the middle of the winter ocean. You polish the apple against your wool sweater, the fabric making a rhythmic zizz-zizz-zizz sound, until the skin shines with a dull, waxy luster. You place it back into the sawdust, burying it deep to protect it from the frost. The inventory is complete. You step back out into the kitchen, the warmth of the stove greeting you like a physical embrace. You close the pantry door, the latch falling back into place with a final metallic click. But the night's logistical duties are not yet finished. You must check the cistern. You move to the small trapdoor in the floor of the utility room, a heavy square of oak with a recessed iron ring. You hook your fingers into the ring, feeling the weight of the wood. You pull upward, the door lifting with a low, grinding sound as it clears the frame. Below lies the darkness of the cellar, and below that, the carved stone basin that catches the rainwater from the lighthouse roof. You descend the narrow wooden stairs, each step a sharp, echoing clack in the confined space. The air here is damp and smells of wet stone and iron. You reach the bottom and hold your lantern over the edge of the cistern. The water is a black, unmoving mirror. Your lantern light reflects in it as a single, shimmering point of gold. You take a long, graduated wooden rod, your measuring stick, and lower it into the water. A splash. The sound is disproportionately loud in the cellar, a bright liquid explosion that echoes off the granite walls. You feel the slight resistance as the rod breaks the surface, then the soft thud as it hits the bottom of the stone basin. You pull it up, the water dripping from the wood with a rhythmic patter-patter-patter back into the reservoir. You hold the rod to the lantern light. The water mark is high, nearly at the 3/4 mark. The winter snows, melting slightly against the warmth of the lighthouse tower before refreezing, have provided an ample supply. You are safe. You have water for the months ahead. You climb back up the stairs, the effort warming your muscles. You close the trapdoor, the wood meeting the frame with a heavy, satisfying boom that vibrates through the soles of your feet. You return to the kitchen and set the hand lantern on the table. The flame flickers slightly as you move it, casting dancing shadows against the walls. You decide to spend the next hour maintaining your tools. You move to the workbench in the corner of the room. Here, neatly arranged on a rack of pegs, are the instruments of your office. You take down the large brass shears used for trimming the lighthouse wicks. They are heavy, the metal cool and substantial in your hands. You open and close them, snip, 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 the blades meeting with a crisp, precise sound. They are slightly dull, you decide. You take up your whetstone, a rectangular slab of fine-grained gray slate. You place it on the workbench and apply a few drops of honing oil. The oil is thick and clear, spreading slowly across the stone in a shimmering film. You take the shears apart, unscrewing the central brass pivot with a heavy screwdriver. The screw turns with a slow, grinding resistance before finally coming free. You begin to sharpen the first blade. You hold it at a precise angle against the stone and move it in a long, sweeping arc. S-H-H-H-S-H-H-H. S-H-H-H-S-H-H-H. The sound is incredibly soothing, a rhythmic abrasion that fills the room. You can feel the vibration of the metal against the stone through your fingertips. You repeat the motion over and over, 20 times on each side. The oil on the stone begins to turn a dark, metallic gray as it carries away the tiny particles of brass and steel. You wipe the blade clean with a scrap of soft leather. It is now bright and keen, the edge catching the lamplight like a sliver of ice. You repeat the process with the second blade. S-H-H-H-S-H-H-H. S-H-H-H-S-H-H-H. Your mind follows the rhythm, your breathing slowing to match the movement of your arm. The world outside, the wind, the waves, the freezing dark, does not exist here. There is only the blade, the stone, the oil, and the sound. Once both blades are sharp, you reassemble the shears. You replace the pivot screw, tightening it until the blades move with a smooth, firm resistance. You test them on a stray piece of cotton twine. Snip. The twine is severed instantly, the ends clean and unfrayed. You wipe the shears with an oily cloth to prevent corrosion and return them to their peg on the wall. You look at your hands. They are stained with oil and metal dust. You move to the wash basin, a heavy porcelain bowl decorated with a faded pattern of blue cornflowers. You pour a little water from the pitcher, the liquid cold and bracing. You take a bar of lye soap, the scent of it sharp and clean. You rub the soap between your palms, creating a thin, white lather. The sound of your hands scrubbing together is a soft, rhythmic hush-hush. You rinse them, the water turning gray as the grime is washed away. You dry your hands on a rough linen towel, the fabric stimulating the circulation in your fingers. You return to the kitchen table and sit. The regulator clock on the wall continues its steady, unhurried count. Tock, tock, tock. You look at the window. The frost has grown thicker now, the fern-like patterns having merged into a solid, crystalline forest that obscures all but the very top of the glass. Beyond the frost, the sky has turned a deep, bruised black. The moon must be high now, though you cannot see it. You feel a profound sense of satisfaction. The larder is full. The water is plentiful. The tools are sharp. The lighthouse is functioning perfectly, its great eye sweeping the ocean every 15 seconds, a pulse of human presence in the void. You lean back in your chair, the wood creaking softly. You are tired, a healthy, honest fatigue that settles into your bones like a warm weight. You watch the last of the light from the stove as it reflects off the polished surface of your tea mug. The world is small, contained within these four walls of stone and wood. It is a world of simple tasks and rhythmic sounds. It is a world where every action has a purpose, and every purpose is clear. You find yourself drifting, the steady tock-tock of the clock becoming a heartbeat, the low hum of the wind becoming a lullaby. You are the keeper of the 1840s, a guardian of the coast, a master of the mundane. And as the night deepens, you find that the monotony of your life is not a burden but a blessing. It is the steady, unchanging foundation upon which your peace is built. You close your eyes for just a moment, listening to the house breathe, listening to the sea roar, and listening to the light as it turns and turns and turns in the high, cold air. The regulator clock in the kitchen strikes the hour of midnight. Its chime is a deep, resonant gong that vibrates through the heavy pine table, through the floorboards, and into the very soles of your feet. You count the strokes, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 12. Each sound is a heavy, golden drop of time falling into the silent pool of the night. The echoes linger in the corners of the room, fading slowly until they are indistinguishable from the low hum of the wind. The house feels heavier now, more settled, as if the midnight hour has added a physical weight to the granite walls. You sit for a moment longer in the fading warmth of the stove, watching a single glowing coal collapse into a pile of fine gray ash. The sound is a microscopic tink, yet in this profound silence, it is as clear as a bell. It is time for the midnight watch. This is the pivot point of the night, the moment when the darkness is at its most absolute and the responsibility of the light feels most profound. You stand, your movements slow and deliberate, a graceful choreography of habit. You reach for your heavy pilot coat, which hangs on a peg by the door. The wool is thick and dense, a dark navy blue that has been weathered by salt and spray. As you pull it on, the fabric feels heavy on your shoulders, a protective armor against the winter. You button it slowly, starting from the bottom. Click, click, click. Each bone button slips into its corresponding hole with a snug, satisfying resistance. You wrap a long, hand-knitted scarf of gray wool around your neck, tucking the ends deep into the collar of your coat. The wool is soft against your skin, smelling of lavender and old wood. You pick up your supply basket. It contains a fresh tin of oil, a clean bundle of cotton wicks, and a small wooden-handled scraper for the glass. You also take your heavy mittens, made of boiled wool that is nearly waterproof. You pull them on, feeling the warmth of your hands being trapped within the thick fibers. Your fingers are slightly restricted, but you have learned to perform your tasks with a clumsy, effective precision. You take up your hand lantern, its flame a steady, comforting presence, and move toward the tower door. The transition from the kitchen to the tower is a transition from the world of the living to the world of the stone. As the door closes behind you, the air drops 10 degrees. The scent of the tower is unique, a mixture of cold granite, damp lime, and the faint, metallic tang of the iron staircase. You begin the ascent. Step, the sound of your heavy boot on the stone is a dull, rhythmic thud. Step. You watch the shadow of your own legs as they are projected against the curved wall by the lantern in your hand. The shadows are long and spindly, dancing in a slow, upward spiral. Step. You count. 10, 11, 12. The rhythm is your heartbeat. Step. You reach the middle landing. Here, the wind is louder, a constant, low-frequency vibration that you feel in your chest. You pause for a moment to catch your breath. The air is crystalline, each breath a sharp, cold draft that tastes of the sea. You look through the narrow, slit window. The world outside is a study in monochrome, black water, white foam, gray sky. The light from above sweeps across the scene, a brilliant white brushstroke that briefly illuminates the heaving swells before vanishing. You continue upward. The stone steps give way to the iron rungs of the final ladder. Your mittens grip the cold iron, the texture of the wool providing a secure hold. You climb, rung by rung, until you push open the trapdoor to the lantern room. The heat from the great lamp greets you first. It is a dry, radiant heat that smells of burning oil and hot brass. The transition from the cold shaft to this warm, golden chamber is always a shock to the senses. You set your basket down on the floor, the sound of the wicker against the iron plate a soft, dry rustle. You stand in the center of the room, bathing in the light. The Fresnel lens is a magnificent, rotating cathedral of glass. Each prism is a perfectly ground facet, catching the light of the central flame and bending it, focusing it, intensifying it. You watch as the light travels through the glass, a shimmering, liquid motion that seems to defy the solidity of the material. Your first task is to check the oil level. You move to the secondary reservoir, a large brass tank that feeds the lamp. You unscrew the cap, the metal cool against your palm. You take a measuring dipstick, a thin sliver of polished wood, and lower it into the oil. You pull it out and hold it to the light. The oil is a deep, translucent amber, clinging to the wood in a thick, viscous film. The level has dropped by exactly 2 inches, precisely what you expected. You take the fresh tin of oil from your basket. It is a 5-gallon container, heavy and substantial. You lift it with both hands, the metal cold and slightly greasy. You position the spout over the reservoir and begin to pour. Glug, glug, glug. The sound is a deep, melodic rhythm. You watch the oil as it flows, a smooth, unbroken ribbon of liquid gold. You can see the tiny bubbles rising to the surface, popping silently. The smell of the fresh oil is strong, a rich, fatty scent that is strangely comforting. You fill the reservoir until it is exactly half an inch from the rim. Then you replace the cap and tighten it until you feel the leather gasket compress. Now you must attend to the glass. During the last hour, a thin film of salt spray has begun to accumulate on the exterior of several panes. If left untreated, the salt will dry into a white crust that will scatter the light and reduce its effectiveness. You take up your wooden-handled scraper and a soft linen cloth. You step out onto the gallery, the cold wind hitting you with renewed force. The sound of the ocean is a continuous, roaring presence here, a wall of white noise that drowns out all other thoughts. You move to the first pane of glass. It is cold, so cold that the moisture from your breath freezes instantly upon it, creating a white fog. You use the scraper to gently remove the salt. A scritch, a scritch, a scritch. The sound is a sharp, rhythmic abrasion. You move the scraper in long, horizontal strokes, watching as the salt crystals are dislodged and blown away by the wind. They look like tiny sparks of white light as they vanish into the darkness. Once the salt is removed, you use the linen cloth to buff the glass. You move your hand in a slow, circular motion. The friction of the cloth creates a faint, squeaking sound, eek, 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 that is barely audible over the wind. You repeat this process for each of the 16 panes. It is a slow, laborious task that requires you to lean into the wind. your muscles straining against the pressure. You focus on the sensation of the cloth against the glass, the way the surface becomes smoother and more transparent with every stroke. By the time you reach the final pane, your hands are numb despite the heavy mittens, and your face is stiff with the cold. You return inside the lantern room, the warmth feeling like a physical weight. You lean against the iron framework of the lens, closing your eyes for a moment. The rhythm of the rotation, the steady clack-clack of the gears, is a soothing counterpoint to the chaos of the wind outside. You take a small brush and clean the tracks of the lens carriage. You move the brush in short, flicking motions, removing any dust or stray fibers that might have settled during the night. The brass tracks are polished and smooth, the rollers moving over them with a quiet, oily grace. You apply a tiny amount of fresh tallow to the gears, the white grease disappearing into the teeth of the wheels as they turn. It is now time for the weather observation. You move to the corner of the lantern room where the instruments are mounted. The barometer is a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, a long, slender tube of glass filled with silver mercury mounted on a polished mahogany board. You tap the glass gently with your fingernail. Tink. The mercury column shivers slightly, its surface a perfect, convex mirror. You read the scale. The pressure is holding steady at 29.8 inches. This suggests that the current weather pattern will persist for at least the next few hours. There is no storm on the horizon, only the steady, relentless cold of the Maine winter. You then check the thermometer. The red liquid has retreated deep into the bulb, indicating a temperature of 8 degrees Fahrenheit. You record these numbers in your mind to be transferred to the logbook once you return to the kitchen. The act of measuring the world, the pressure, the temperature, the oil, provides a sense of control and order. It turns the vast, unknowable ocean into a series of manageable data points. You sit on your stool, the wood slightly warmed by the lamp. You take a small piece of hardtack from your pocket, a dry, dense biscuit that requires a great deal of chewing. The sound of the biscuit snapping in your mouth is a sharp, dry report. You chew slowly, the flavor of the flour and salt filling your mouth. It is not a meal, but it is a distraction, a way to mark the passage of time. You watch the great beam of light as it leaves the lantern room. It starts as a concentrated glow within the lens, then expands into a massive, solid-looking shaft of white that stretches out toward the horizon. You can see the snowflakes dancing in the beam, thousands of tiny, glittering diamonds that swirl and tumble in the turbulent air. They appear for only a second as the light passes over them, then vanish back into the void. You find yourself following a single snowflake with your eyes, watching its chaotic journey until it disappears. Then you find another, and another. 1, 2, 3, the light sweeps. 10, 11, 12, the dark returns. The rhythm is a lullaby for the soul. The lantern room is a bubble of light and warmth suspended in an ocean of darkness. Within this bubble, everything is known and purposeful. Outside, everything is vast and indifferent. You are the bridge between these two worlds, the keeper of the boundary. You feel the heaviness of the night beginning to settle into your bones. It is not a fatigue of the body, but a quietude of the mind. Your thoughts have become slow and fluid, like the oil in the reservoir. You are no longer thinking about the past or the future. You are only thinking about the next rotation of the lens, the next tick of the clock, the next breath of the wind. The midnight watch is nearly half over. You stand and perform one final check of the wicks. They are perfect, two steady, golden cones of flame that do not flicker. You adjust the ventilation slightly, turning a small brass wheel that opens the louvers in the floor. A stream of fresh, cold air enters the room, mixing with the warm air and creating a gentle, circulating current. The smell of the room changes slightly, becoming fresher and sharper. You gather your tools and place them back in the basket. You take one last look at the horizon. There are no lights from ships tonight. The ocean is empty, a vast and lonely desert of water. But you continue to watch, your eyes scanning the darkness with a practiced, rhythmic motion. You are the sentinel, the unblinking eye of the coast. You begin the descent. The ladder, the stone stairs, the cold air of the tower. Each step is a return to the earth, a return to the domesticity of the house. You reach the kitchen door and step inside. The fire in the stove has burned down to a steady, orange glow. The room is silent and warm. You move to the desk and open the logbook. Midnight, pressure 29.8 steady. Temp 8F oil replenished. Salt removed from lantern glass. All lamps burning clear. No vessels sighted. You blot the ink with sand, the tiny grains whispering as they slide across the paper. You close the book and extinguish your hand lantern. The room is plunged into a soft, red twilight. You move to the armchair by the stove and sit. You pull a heavy wool blanket over your lap, the fabric thick and comforting. You close your eyes, listening to the ticking of the clock. Tock, tock, tock. The sound is the heartbeat of the world, and for now, it is the only sound you need to hear. The light continues to turn, high above you, and the sea continues to roar far below you. And you, the keeper, are safe in the silence of the night. The clock upon the kitchen wall, a stately piece of New England craftsmanship with a pendulum that swings with a heavy, brass-laden finality, marks the hour of 2 in the morning. This is the hour of the deep watch, the time when the world feels most fragile, suspended in the crystalline grip of the winter night. You sit in your high-backed wooden chair, the grain of the oak pressing gently against your spine. The kitchen is now lit only by the faint, rhythmic pulse of the lighthouse beam as it catches the frost on the upper window pane, casting a fleeting, ethereal glow across the floor before retreating into shadow. Light, then dark. Light, then dark. You find yourself timing your own breathing to this external heartbeat. Inhale as the light sweeps the room. Exhale as the shadows return. It is a biological synchronization with the machine you serve. The silence of the house has reached a new density. At this hour, the very molecules of the air seem to have slowed, chilled by the immense mass of the granite walls that separate you from the freezing Atlantic. You reach out a hand and touch the surface of the pine table. It is cold now, the warmth from the earlier tea having long since dissipated. You run your palm across the wood, feeling the microscopic ridges and valleys created by years of scrubbing with sand and lye. The texture is a map of labor, a history of 1,000 quiet mornings and 1,000 lonely nights. It is time once again to check the rotation weights. In the center of the lighthouse tower, a hollow shaft descends from the lantern room to the very base of the masonry. Within this shaft, a series of massive iron weights, suspended by a heavy braided cable of hemp and wire, provide the gravitational energy required to turn the several tons of glass and brass that comprise the Fresnel lens. As the lens rotates, the weights slowly, imperceptibly sink toward the floor. If they reach the bottom, the light will stall, becoming a fixed, unblinking eye that could mislead a navigator into thinking they have found a different headland. You stand, the movement producing a soft, muffled shhh as your wool trousers rub against the chair. You pick up your heavy iron flashlight, not the modern electric variety, but a sturdy oil-burning hand lamp with a silvered reflector that focuses the yellow flame into a soft, wandering beam. You move toward the tower door, the heavy iron key resting in your palm like a cold, smooth stone. You insert the key into the lock. It turns with a heavy, mechanical thunk, a sound that echoes up the spiral staircase like a pebble dropped into a deep well. As you step into the tower, the air is markedly different, thinner, sharper, and smelling of ancient dust and damp lime. You walk to the central shaft and open the small wooden inspection hatch. You hold your lamp over the opening. Far below, in the vertical darkness, you can see the heavy iron weights hanging in the void. They are massive, cylindrical forms, coated in a thick layer of black grease to prevent corrosion. You watch them for a minute. They do not appear to move, yet you know they are descending at a rate of exactly 1 inch every 4 minutes. You look at the cable. It is a marvel of tension, every fiber of the hemp and every strand of the wire pulled taut by the relentless pull of gravity. You reach out a gloved hand and touch the cable. You can feel the vibration of the clockwork mechanism far above, a high-frequency hum that travels down the line, a mechanical purr that tells you the gears are meshing perfectly. The escapement is releasing as it should, and the great lens is gliding on its bed of mercury and rollers. Satisfied, you begin the long climb once more. This is the 3rd time tonight you have ascended these stairs, and your muscles have settled into a state of rhythmic endurance. Step, the granite is unyielding, a foundation that has stood against the gales of a century. Step. You notice a small patch of moss, dried and gray, clinging to a mortar joint. You reach out and brush it with your thumb, the brittle plant matter crumbling into fine dust. Step. The spiral is tight here, forcing you to lean slightly into the curve of the wall. Step. You count the steps as a way of measuring the silence. 34, 35, 36. By 40, you reach the lower gallery. Here in the watch room just below the lantern, there is a small wooden desk bolted to the wall. This is where you spend the quietest hours of the night when the weather is calm. You set your lamp on the desk, its light illuminating a small brass-bound telescope, a tin of tobacco, and a wooden pipe. You do not smoke tonight. The air is too still, and you wish to keep your senses sharp. Instead, you pick up a small, smooth stone you found on the beach 3 months ago. It is a piece of basalt, worn into a perfect oval by the action of the waves. You turn it over in your fingers, feeling its weight and its cold, obsidian smoothness. It is a physical anchor to the earth, a reminder of the shore that lies beneath the churning water. You climb the final iron ladder into the lantern room. The warmth is immediate and suffocatingly cozy. The air is thick with the scent of the burning oil, a smell that is now so familiar it feels like a part of your own skin. You move to the lamp assembly. The flame is burning with a steady, white-hot intensity. You take a small, silver-plated mirror and hold it behind the flame to check the back of the wicks. They are even and clean. You decide to perform a wick creep adjustment, a delicate task that involves microscopically raising the cotton wicks to ensure the flame remains at the precise focal point of the lens. You reach for the small brass thumb screws at the base of the burner. They are warm to the touch. You turn the first screw a fraction of a millimeter. Click, the sound is tiny, a microscopic engagement of metal teeth. You watch the flame. It responds by growing a hair's breadth taller, its light becoming a fraction whiter. You adjust the second wick to match. Now the two flames merge into a single, brilliant pillar of light. The Fresnel lens captures this light, and you watch as it travels through the concentric rings of glass. The lens is a masterpiece of light bending. You stand close to it, so close that you can see your own distorted reflection in the prisms. As the lens rotates, your image stretches and compresses, a ghostly figure dancing in the glass. You follow a single prism with your eyes. It is a triangular bar of high-purity lead glass, polished to a degree that makes it almost invisible. You notice a tiny speck of dust on the interior surface. You take a long-handled brush made of camel hair, soft as a cloud, and reach into the framework. You gently flick the brush against the glass. The speck vanishes, caught in the fine hairs of the brush. You spend the next 20 minutes moving around the lens, inspecting every square inch of the glass. You do this not because it is dirty, but because the act of cleaning is a way of honoring the light. You move with the rotation, a slow, circular walk that keeps you in the shadow of the astragals. 1, 2, 3, step 4, 5, 6, step. The rhythm of your walk is perfectly synced with the 15-second rotation of the light. You have become a part of the machine, a biological gear in the lighthouse's heart. The wind outside has dropped to a mere whisper. Without the roar of the gale, the sounds of the ocean become more distinct. You can hear the long, low whoosh of the swell as it draws back over the shingle beach on the leeward side of the island. It is a rhythmic, scouring sound, the sound of 1,000 stones being rolled and polished by the water. SSSSHHHHLLRRP. SSSSHHHLLRRP. It is a peaceful sound, the breath of the sea as it sleeps. You look out through the lantern glass toward the mainland. In the far distance, perhaps 15 miles away, you can see the tiniest pinprick of a light. It is another lighthouse, your neighbor to the north. You watch it for a long time, waiting for its characteristic flash. There it is, a faint, rhythmic pulse, almost lost in the vastness of the dark. You feel a sense of kinship with that distant keeper. You are both alone, yet you are both part of a chain of light that stretches along the entire coast. You are the stars that have been brought down to earth to guide the way through the night. You return to the center of the room and check the clockwork governor. This is a device with 2 brass balls that spin on a central spindle. As they spin, centrifugal force pulls them outward, regulating the speed of the rotation. You watch them spinning, a blur of golden metal. The motion is so smooth it looks like a solid ring of brass. You listen to the sound of the governor, a high-pitched, musical whirring like the wings of a hummingbird. You apply a single drop of whale oil to the top of the spindle, watching as the liquid is instantly drawn into the bearing. The pitch of the whirring drops slightly, becoming smoother and more resonant. The night is at its most profound. You feel a deep, heavy sense of tranquility. There is no one to talk to, no news to hear, no problems to solve. There is only the light, the oil, the glass, and the sea. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the warm, oily air. Your heart rate has slowed, your mind has cleared. You are the keeper of the 1800s, and this is your world. You prepare to descend once more. You gather your tools and place them back in the basket. You take one last look at the flame, ensuring its height is perfect. You step onto the ladder, the iron cold through your mittens. The descent is a journey back into the shadow. As you move down the stone stairs, the golden light of the lantern fades, replaced by the cool, gray twilight of the tower's interior. You reach the kitchen door and step back into the domestic world. The kitchen is still warm, the stove holding onto its heat with a stubborn persistence. You move to the wood box and select a single piece of driftwood you found on the shore yesterday. It is a piece of cedar, silvered by the salt and polished by the sand. You place it onto the coals. As it catches, it releases a sharp, sweet scent, the smell of the forest and the sea combined. You watch as a small pocket of salt trapped in the wood burns with a brilliant, ghostly blue flame. You sit at the table and reach for your logbook. The paper is cool and slightly damp. You pick up your pen, the nib scratching softly as you prepare to write. 0200 a.m. Wind calm, sea lights swell from the east, weights checked and tensioned. Governor oiled, wicks adjusted for maximum brilliance. Visibility excellent. The north light is visible on the horizon. All remains in perfect order. You blot the ink and close the book. The sound of the cover meeting the pages is a soft, final thud. You lean back in your chair and close your eyes. The regulator clock on the wall continues its steady, unhurried count. Tock, tock, tock. You think about the morning to come. You will need to clear the path to the oil shed if it snows. You will need to check the roof for any loose shingles. You will need to cook your morning porridge. But those are tasks for another world, a world of light and activity. For now, in the heart of the night, you are content to simply be. You are the keeper of the silence. You are the guardian of the dark. And as the pendulum swings and the great light turns, you find yourself drifting into a state of perfect, hypnotic peace. A boredom so deep and so beautiful it feels like a dream. The regulator clock strikes the hour of 4 in the morning. This is the deepest, most silent cavern of the night. On the mainland, even the hardiest woodsmen and the most restless livestock are submerged in the heavy velvet of sleep. Here, on the island, the world has achieved a state of crystalline stasis. The frost on the windows has thickened into a dense, opaque curtain of white lace, shielding the kitchen from the star-studded void outside. You sit in your armchair, the wool blanket tucked tightly around your legs, feeling the weight of the night as a physical presence, not a burden, but a comfortable, encompassing pressure. The heat from the oak log you added earlier has permeated the room, creating a pocket of summer in the heart of an Arctic winter. You reach to the floor and lift your mending basket. It is a humble object woven from salt-bleached seagrass, its edges softened by years of friction against the floorboards. Inside lies a collection of items that represent the quiet maintenance of a solitary life. You rummage through it, the dry grass of the basket making a soft, rhythmic shish-shish sound. Your fingers find a pair of heavy wool stockings, knitted from the thick, oily wool of northern sheep. The heel of the right stocking has worn thin, the fibers translucent and fragile from miles of pacing the stone galleries and iron stairs. You take up a darning egg, carved from a single piece of polished boxwood. It is smooth and cool, fitting perfectly into the palm of your hand. You slide the egg into the heel of the stocking. The wood stretches the knitted fabric taut, revealing the intricate grid of the weave. You observe the structure of the wool, each stitch a tiny, interlocking loop of fiber, a miniature architectural feat. You can see the individual hairs of the wool, some coarse and dark, others fine and white, all twisted together into a single, resilient thread. Next, you select your needle. It is a long, blunt-tipped darning needle made of polished steel. You hold it up to the light of the oil lamp. The metal reflects a single, sharp point of gold. You take a length of matching yarn from a wooden spool. The yarn is fuzzy and soft, smelling faintly of the lanolin that keeps the sheep dry in the rain. You bring the end of the yarn to your lips, moistening it slightly to tingle the fibers together. The act of threading the needle is a moment of intense, focused stillness. You squint slightly, your eyes following the silver eye of the needle as it waits. You guide the yarn toward the opening. There is a moment of resistance, then the yarn slides through, a soft zip that exists more as a feeling in your fingertips than a sound in the air. You pull the thread through, evening the ends, and prepare to begin. You push the needle through the healthy fabric at the edge of the hole. Push, pull, zip. The sound of the wool being pierced is a microscopic thrup. You move the needle back across the gap, creating a bridge of new yarn. Over, under, over, under. The rhythm of the darning is hypnotic. Your hand moves in a slow, circular arc, the needle dancing between the existing threads with the precision of a weaver's shuttle. You are recreating the fabric, stitch by stitch, filling the void with warmth and structure. You focus on the tension of the thread. It must be tight enough to provide support, but loose enough to allow the wool to breathe. As you work, your mind wanders to the history of the materials in your hands. You think of the sheep on the mainland, huddling together in a barn against the very wind that currently whistles around your tower. You think of the woman who spun this yarn, her spinning wheel whirring in a kitchen much like this one, the rhythmic hum-clack of the wood marking the passage of her own quiet hours. You feel a connection to these distant, unknown people, a thread of human effort that spans the miles of cold water. You finish the first row of stitches and turn the stocking 90 degrees. Now you begin the cross weave. This is the part of the task that requires the most patience. You must weave the needle over and over the new threads you have just laid down, creating a tiny, dense rug over the wooden egg. Under, over, under, over. The needle makes a soft tink every time it brushes against the boxwood egg. Tink, zip, tink, zip. The hole slowly vanishes. In its place, a thick, reinforced patch of wool emerges, a testament to your vigilance. You feel a deep sense of satisfaction in this small repair. In a world of vast, destructive forces, the crushing ice, the eroding salt, the howling wind, the act of mending a sock is a quiet, stubborn rebellion. It is a declaration that things can be made whole again, that wear can be countered with care. You tie off the thread with a neat, flat knot that will not chafe against your heel. You use a small pair of silver-handled embroidery scissors to snip the excess yarn. Snip. The sound is bright and final. You slide the darning egg out of the stocking and run your thumb over the patch. It is firm, warm, and ready for another season of service. You repeat the process with the second stocking, the rhythm of the work carrying you through the next 40 minutes of the night. The clock ticks. The lamp burns. The needle moves. The world remains perfectly, beautifully still. Once the stockings are mended and returned to the basket, you decide to visit your small collection of books. They sit on a single shelf above the desk, a modest library that has been your primary companion during the winter months. There are 6 volumes in total, a Bible bound in heavy black leather, a navigator's almanac, a collection of poems by William Wordsworth, a thick tome on the natural history of Maine, a tattered copy of Robinson Crusoe, and a handwritten journal from a previous keeper. You select the book of poems. The cover is made of green cloth, faded by the sun into a soft, mossy hue. The corners are bumped and frayed, showing the gray boards beneath. You carry the book to the table and lay it flat. The spine gives a low, dry crackle as you open it, the sound of old glue and ancient paper protesting the movement. The pages are thick and creamy, with deckled edges that feel like rough linen under your fingertips. You notice the foxing, the small, brownish spots caused by the salt air and age that mottle the margins like tea stains. You turn the pages slowly, one by one. The paper makes a soft, shushing sound, a dry rustle that reminds you of autumn leaves. You find a poem you have read 100 times before. You do not need to read the words to know them. You simply look at the shape of the stanzas on the page, the elegant, black typeface standing out against the pale paper. You trace the first letter of the poem with your finger. It is a capital I, decorated with a flourish of ink. The texture of the ink is slightly raised, a microscopic ridge of pigment that has dried over decades. You imagine the printer in London or Boston, setting each lead character into the frame with a steady hand. You think of the weight of the printing press as it descended onto the paper, forcing the ink into the fibers. Every book is a physical artifact of human intent, a vessel for thoughts that have survived the passage of time. You read a few lines silently, your lips barely moving. The stars that she dote on are over her head, and the sea is the city where she can be led. The words are slow and melodic, matching the rhythm of the lighthouse rotation. You find yourself reading at the pace of the light. 1 line for the flash, 2 lines for the dark. The poetry becomes a part of the atmosphere, a linguistic layer added to the scent of oil and the warmth of the stove. You do not seek excitement or revelation in these pages. You seek the comfort of the familiar. You seek the steady, unchanging nature of the printed word. After a time, you close the book. You spend a few minutes simply staring at the cover, your hand resting on the green cloth. The fire in the stove has settled into a deep, glowing bed of coals, radiating a steady, unwavering heat. You feel a sense of profound equilibrium. You are well fed, your clothes are mended, your mind is fed by the words of the poets, and your light is burning brightly atop the tower. You stand and move to the window. You take a small copper coin from your pocket and press it against the frost on the glass. The warmth of your hand, conducted through the metal, melts a perfect circle into the ice. You peer through this tiny porthole into the night. The moon has set, and the sky is a black tapestry of stars. They are so bright and so numerous that they seem to exert a pressure of their own. You see the Great Bear hanging over the northern horizon, its celestial gears turning with the same inevitability as the clockwork in the tower. You see the faint, fuzzy patch of the Pleiades, like a handful of silver dust thrown against the dark. The world feels immense, yet you do not feel small. You feel like the center of a vast, rotating mechanism, a vital component in the clockwork of the universe. The lighthouse beam sweeps past your field of vision. You see the light catch the snowflakes that are beginning to fall again, small, lazy flakes that drift down like feathers. They are not the driving flakes of a storm, but the gentle precursors of a quiet morning. You watch them fall into the black water, vanishing instantly. 1, 2, 3, the light sweeps. 10, 11, 12, the shadows return. It is nearly 5 in the morning. The final watch of the night is approaching. You feel the pull of the tower, the need to return to the lantern room to witness the transition from night to dawn. But for a few more minutes, you remain in the kitchen, savoring the absolute peace of the hour. You pick up a small brush and sweep a few stray crumbs of hardtack from the table into your hand. You drop them into the stove, watching as they flare up for a microsecond before turning to ash. Everything is in its place. The world is ordered. The night is being kept. You are the sentinel of the 1840s, and as the snow falls silently onto the granite rocks of your island, you find that there is no place else in the world you would rather be. The monotony is your sanctuary, and the silence is your song. The regulator clock in the kitchen strikes 5 times. Each note is a heavy, bronze-colored vibration that seems to hang in the air long after the hammer has pulled back from the chime. 5 in the morning. This is the hour of the first light, though the sun is still hidden far below the curvature of the frozen earth. This is the time when the night begins its slow, agonizingly beautiful retreat, and the responsibility of the keeper shifts from maintaining the dark to preparing for the day. You sit in your armchair for one final minute, feeling the way the heat of the room has reached a perfect, dry equilibrium. The silence is no longer heavy, it is expectant. You stand, and this time you do not reach for the blanket. Instead, you reach for your heavy brass lantern, the one with the thick bullseye lens that casts a focused, searching beam. You check the oil, it is full. You check the wick, it is sharp. You strike a match, the sudden flare illuminating the room in a burst of orange and yellow. You light the lantern, and the small, steady flame becomes your companion for the final ascent of the night. You move toward the tower door, your boots sounding a muffled, rhythmic thump-thump on the rag rug, then a sharper, clearer clack-clack on the bare floorboards of the transition passage. The air in the tower is at its coldest now. The heat of the previous day has completely radiated away into the granite, and the masonry feels as though it is breathing out a fine, invisible mist of frost. You begin the climb. Step 1. The stone is a silent witness to your passage. Step 2. The light from your hand lantern sweeps across the curved walls, revealing the texture of the lime wash, a landscape of tiny cracks and smooth expanses that look like a map of a distant, frozen moon. Step 3. You feel the pull in your calves, a familiar, grounding ache that tells you that you are alive and at work. Step 10, 20, 30. The rhythm is a heartbeat. You reach the middle gallery and pause. Here, The narrow slit windows are perfectly aligned with the eastern horizon. You look out. The sky is no longer the absolute light-consuming black of midnight. It has shifted into a deep, velvety shade of violet, a color so rich and heavy it feels like a physical substance. At the very edge of the world where the ocean meets the sky, there is the faintest, thinnest line of slate gray. It is not light, not yet. It is merely the absence of the dark. You watch it for a moment, your breath forming a small, white cloud that lingers in the still air of the tower before dissipating. You continue upward. The iron rungs of the ladder are now so cold they feel as though they might sear your skin through your wool mittens. You climb with a slow, measured pace, ensuring each foot is planted firmly before moving the next. You reach the trapdoor, push it open, and emerge into the golden sanctuary of the lantern room. The heat here is a stark contrast to the chill of the tower. The great lamp is still burning with its steady, magnificent brilliance, but after 12 hours of continuous combustion, the atmosphere has changed. The scent of the oil is thicker, more cooked, and the air has a dry, metallic quality that tickles the back of your throat. You set your hand lantern on the floor and approach the lens. The first task of the morning watch is the cleaning of the glass chimney. Over the course of the night, the intense heat and the combustion of the oil have created a microscopic layer of carbon on the interior of the glass tube that surrounds the flame. To an untrained eye, it might look clear, but to you, it is a veil that robs the light of its true power. You take a pair of heavy, heat-resistant leather tongs from their hook on the wall. They are long and slender, with tips padded in soft, charred asbestos. You move to the lamp. The heat radiating from the flame is a physical pressure against your face. You carefully, with a hand that has performed this maneuver thousands of times, grip the top edge of the glass chimney. You lift it upward, moving it slowly so as not to crack the glass with a sudden change in temperature. Clink, the sound of the glass meeting the tongs, is a tiny musical note. You carry the hot chimney to the cooling rack, a small iron stand padded with flannel. You set it down and wait. While it cools, you take up a clean, dry silk cloth. Silk is the only material fine enough for this task. Its fibers are long and smooth, and they do not shed lint that could catch fire or dim the glass. You hold the cloth in your hands, feeling its incredible softness. It is a scrap of an old ship's signal flag, a piece of yellow silk that has seen the South Pacific before finding its home in this main tower. Once the chimney has cooled to a touchable temperature, you begin the cleaning. You wrap the silk cloth around a long wooden dowel and insert it into the tube. Swish, 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 swish. The sound is a soft, rhythmic friction. You move the dowel in a slow, spiraling motion, watching as the faint, gray haze of soot is transferred from the glass to the yellow silk. You pull the dowel out and inspect the glass. It is becoming a vacuum of clarity. You repeat the process until the chimney is so transparent it seems to disappear entirely when the light hits it. It is a ghost of a tube, a cylinder of pure, unobstructed passage. You return the chimney to the lamp. Again, you move with extreme caution. You lower the glass over the flame, watching as the heat begins to swirl within the tube. The flame responds instantly to the improved draft. It grows taller, whiter, and more stable. The roar of the lamp, a sound so low it is more of a vibration than a noise, becomes a purer, more consistent hum. Now you turn your attention to the oil reservoir. This is the final replenishment of the night. You take the large brass oil can, its surface polished to a mirror shine, and fit the long spout into the filling port. Glug, glug, glug. The oil is thicker now, chilled by its time in the tower, and it flows with the consistency of heavy honey. You watch the level rise in the glass gauge tube. You stop exactly at the full mark, not a drop more, not a drop less. You wipe the spout with a rag, ensuring no oil remains to drip and smoke on the hot brass. The lens continues its majestic rotation. 1, 2, 3, the beam sweeps. 10, 11, 12, the shadows return. You move to the exterior gallery door. It is time for the final glass check. You step outside, and the transition is like stepping into a different world. The wind has died down to a complete, eerie calm. The only sound is the rhythmic, muffled thud-thump of the Atlantic swell against the base of the island, several hundred feet below. It sounds like the breathing of a giant. The air is incredibly clear. You look up and see the stars. They are fading now, the smaller ones having already vanished into the deepening blue of the sky. Sirius, the great dog star, is still visible in the southwest, a brilliant, flickering diamond of ice. The constellation of Orion is beginning to tilt toward the horizon, his belt of 3 stars a perfect diagonal line. You watch as a single meteor, a shooting star, streaks across the zenith, a momentary scratch of silver light that vanishes before you can even draw a breath. The ocean below is no longer a void. In the pre-dawn light, it has become a vast, heaving sheet of lead-gray silk. You can see the patterns of the swells, long, undulating lines of energy that travel for miles before meeting the resistance of the rocks. You see the white water where the waves break, a spectral, glowing foam that marks the edges of the ledges. You take your scraper and run it over the lantern panes. There is no salt this time, only a fine, powdery dusting of dry snow that has settled in the corners. You brush it away with a small whisk broom made of stiff horsehair. Scritch-scratch, scritch-scratch. The sound is sharp and clean. The glass is clear. The light is unobstructed. You return inside and sit on your stool. You are tired now, but it is a quiet, manageable fatigue. Your mind is drifting through the logistics of the morning. You will need to check the weather vane. You will need to inspect the roof of the oil shed. You will need to prepare the morning meal. But for now, you simply watch the sky. The color is changing rapidly now. The violet has turned to a deep royal blue, which is now softening into a pale, translucent azure. The line on the horizon is no longer gray. It is a shimmering, metallic silver. This is the blue hour, that magical time when the world feels as though it is made of glass and shadow. Everything is clear, yet everything is softened by the lack of direct light. You watch as the stars vanish, one by one. First the faint ones, then the middling ones, until only the brightest remain. Finally, even Sirius is gone, swallowed by the rising tide of the morning light. The world is becoming visible in all its stark winter glory. You can see the snow-covered mainland now, a jagged white line in the distance. You can see the individual rocks of your island, each one capped with a thick white hat of snow. You take out your pocket watch, a heavy, silver-cased timepiece. You open the cover with a soft click. The face is white enamel with elegant black Roman numerals. You watch the second hand as it sweeps around the dial. It is 5:45. In exactly 15 minutes, the sun will reach the point where the light of the lighthouse is no longer required. You move to the clockwork mechanism. You check the tension on the cable one last time. You decide to give the crank 3 final turns just to ensure the rotation remains perfectly smooth for the final minutes of the watch. Clack, clack, clack. The sound is deep and resonant. You feel the weight of the iron in your arms, the physical effort a grounding reminder of your duty. You return to your stool and wait. The sky is now a pale, glowing gold at the horizon. The clouds, which you couldn't see in the dark, are revealed as long, thin streaks of mare's tails, high-altitude cirrus clouds that catch the first rays of the sun. They are turning from gray to pink, then to a brilliant, burning orange. The transition is nearly complete. The world is awakening. You hear a sound, a sharp, lonely cry. You look out and see a single herring gull, its wings white against the blue sky as it circles the tower. It is the first living creature you have seen in hours. You watch it as it glides on the rising thermal air, a master of the wind. You feel a profound sense of peace. The night has been kept. The ships have been guided. The light has never flickered. You have fulfilled your vow to the sea and to the sailors who traverse it. You take a deep, slow breath, smelling the morning air, cold, clean, and full of the promise of a new day. The sky is now so bright that the beam of the lighthouse is becoming a ghost, a pale, flickering shimmer that is being drowned out by the rising sun. You wait for the precise moment. You look at your watch. 5:59. The second hand ticks. 1, 2, 3. You stand and move toward the lamp. You reach for the heavy brass extinguisher, a cone-shaped tool on a long handle. You hold it over the flame. You watch the golden cone for one last second, admiring its steady, unwavering strength. 6 o'clock. You lower the extinguisher. The flame vanishes instantly, leaving behind a tiny, swirling curl of white smoke. The room is suddenly plunged into the natural light of the morning. The lens continues to rotate for a moment, then you engage the brake. Grind. The massive machine comes to a slow, majestic halt. The silence that follows is absolute. You have finished the night. The light is out. The day has begun. You stand in the quiet lantern room, bathed in the pale, cold light of a Maine winter morning, and you feel a deep, quiet joy in the simple, monotonous perfection of your life. The great light is extinguished, and for the first time in 12 hours, the lantern room is filled with the natural, pale light of a January morning. It is a thin, watery light, filtered through a sky that has turned the color of a tarnished silver spoon. The shadows in the room are no longer sharp and dancing. They are soft, gray, and stagnant. You stand by the now silent lens, your hand resting on the cool brass framework. The vibration that has defined your night, the rhythmic thrum of the clockwork, has ceased, replaced by a silence so profound it feels as though the island itself is holding its breath. You can hear the faint, metallic tink-tink-tink of the lamp housing as it begins to cool, the metal contracting in the morning chill. This is the transition, the quiet bridge between the vigilance of the night and the domesticity of the day. You move to the secondary weights that drive the rotation. During the final hour, they reached their lowest point, hovering just inches above the heavy timber floor of the tower's base far below. You take up the heavy iron winding handle, its surface pitted and worn from decades of use. You fit it onto the winding arbor, the square hole meeting the steel stud with a solid, muffled clack. You begin the morning winding. This is a task of pure physics, a slow and steady exertion that warms your muscles and clears the lingering fog of the night watch from your mind. Crank, clack, crank, clack. The sound of the ratchet is a deep, rhythmic percussion that echoes up the hollow shaft of the tower. You feel the resistance of the 500-pound weights through the handle, a heavy, gravitational pull that requires the full weight of your body to overcome. You move with a slow, deliberate pace, one rotation of the handle every 3 seconds. You focus on the sensation in your shoulders, the way the wool of your coat bunches and pulls with every revolution. Your breathing becomes a part of the rhythm. Inhale on the upward pull, exhale on the downward push. It takes nearly 10 minutes to raise the weights to their starting position at the top of the tower. By the time you finish, a fine sheen of perspiration has formed on your brow, despite the cold. You remove the handle, the iron ringing softly as you set it in its leather scabbard on the wall. Now you must secure the lantern room for the day. This is a process of protection. The intense sunlight of a clear winter day, magnified by the hundreds of prisms in the Fresnel lens, could potentially create enough focused heat to scorch the interior woodwork or even damage the lamp assembly. You reach for the linen curtains, vast, heavy sheets of unbleached fabric that hang from a circular brass rail around the perimeter of the glass. You pull the first curtain. The rings slide along the rail with a dry, musical shir-shir sound. The fabric is thick and coarse, smelling of flax and the sea. One by one, you draw the curtains, overlapping them carefully to ensure no sliver of direct sunlight can penetrate the room. As each curtain closes, the room grows dimmer and quieter, the pale morning light replaced by a soft, diffused amber glow. The lantern room is now a cocoon, a shaded sanctuary where the great lens can rest until the sun dips below the horizon once more. You gather your tools, the spent wicks, the empty oil cans, the polishing cloths, and place them in your wicker basket. The descent is always faster than the climb, but you do not rush. You savor the feeling of gravity assisting your movements. Step, the stone is solid and familiar. Step. You pass the narrow windows, seeing the world outside through the thick, wavy glass. The ocean is a vast, undulating field of slate, the whitecaps looking like scattered petals of jasmine. Step. You reach the living quarters. As you step into the kitchen, you are greeted by the lingering warmth of the hearth. The fire has burned down to a thick bed of white ash, beneath which a few stubborn embers still pulse with a dim, orange light. The air is still, smelling of the cedar driftwood you burned in the early hours. Your first task of the morning is the rejuvenation of the fire. You move to the wood box and select several handfuls of kindling, thin strips of pine that you split yourself with a small hand hatchet. They are bone dry and snap with a sharp, brittle report as you break them into smaller pieces. You arrange them in a delicate teepee over the embers. You pick up the bellows, a beautiful instrument of wood, leather, and brass. You pump them slowly, Hiss, whoosh, hiss, whoosh. The sound is the breath of the house. You direct the nozzle at the base of the wood. The embers brighten to a brilliant, searing crimson. A tiny wisp of white smoke curls upward, followed by a sudden, cheerful pop as a pocket of resin ignites. A small, blue flame licks at the pine, quickly turning yellow and orange as it takes hold. You add 2 small split logs of oak, the bark rough and gray. You watch as the fire grows, the heat beginning to radiate outward once more, pushing back the morning chill that had begun to seep in through the floorboards. With the fire established, you turn to the ritual of the morning porridge. This is the foundation of your day, a meal that is as unchanging and reliable as the tides. You move to the pantry and retrieve the stoneware jar of oats. You take your heavy cast iron pot, the spider, and carry it to the water barrel. You use a wooden ladle to measure out exactly 3 measures of water. The water is cold and clear, making a bright plink-plink sound as it hits the bottom of the pot. You carry the pot back to the stove and set it directly over the heat. You measure out a single, generous cup of oats. They are coarse ground, the husks still visible among the pale, flattened grains. You let them slip through your fingers into the water. Shh. They float on the surface for a moment before slowly absorbing the liquid and sinking to the bottom. You take your long-handled wooden spoon, carved from a single piece of apple wood, and begin to stir. The stirring is a meditation. You move the spoon in a slow, clockwise circle. The wood of the spoon makes a soft, rhythmic thump-thump against the iron sides of the pot. As the water begins to heat, the oats release their starch and the liquid transforms from clear to a milky, opaque white. You watch the surface of the water, waiting for the first sign of movement. A tiny bubble rises and pops, then another. Soon the porridge begins to simmer, a low, thick blurp-blurp sound that fills the quiet kitchen. You turn the damper on the stove to reduce the heat, allowing the oats to cook slowly, absorbing the water until they are soft and creamy. The smell is wonderful, the toasted, earthy scent of grain mixing with the faint sweetness of the wood smoke. It is the smell of safety and sustenance. While the porridge simmers, you prepare your bowl. It is a heavy, hand-turned wooden bowl, its surface smoothed by years of use until it feels like satin. You take a small jar of molasses from the shelf. The lid is stuck, requiring a firm, steady twist. A squeak-lack. The molasses inside is dark, thick, and viscous, smelling of burnt sugar and deep, southern summers. You take a spoon and drizzle a thin, spiral thread of the syrup into the bottom of your bowl. You watch as it settles into a glossy, obsidian pool. The porridge is ready. It has thickened into a dense, nourishing mass, the individual grains having softened into the whole. You lift the pot from the stove, the iron handle hot even through your wool mitt. You ladle the porridge into your bowl, the steam rising in a thick, fragrant cloud. You take the pot back to the sink and fill it with water to soak, the steam hissing as the cold water hits the hot iron. You sit at the table, the wooden chair creaking softly as you settle in. You do not eat immediately. You watch the steam as it rises from the bowl, swirling in the pale light from the window. You take a small tin of salt and sprinkle a few crystals over the top. They look like tiny diamonds against the pale porridge before they dissolve into the heat. You take the first bite. It is hot, thick, and incredibly satisfying. The creaminess of the oats, the subtle saltiness, and the deep, complex sweetness of the molasses combine into a flavor that is both simple and profound. You chew slowly, savoring the texture. Each spoonful is a deliberate act of nourishment. You feel the warmth of the meal spreading through your chest and down into your limbs, chasing away the last remnants of the night's chill. The kitchen is silent except for the ticking of the clock and the soft sound of your spoon against the bowl. Tock, click, tock, click. The light outside is growing stronger, but it remains soft and diffused. You look at the window. The frost is beginning to melt at the bottom of the panes, the ice turning into clear, glistening rivulets that track their way down the glass. You watch a single drop as it hangs on the wooden sill, catching the light like a crystal before falling. When the bowl is empty, you sit for a long moment, your hands wrapped around the warm wood. You feel a deep, heavy sense of contentment. The night's work is done. The morning's meal is finished. The world is at peace. You look at your hands, the skin calloused and stained but steady. You are the keeper, and this is your reward, the quiet, uncomplicated perfection of a task well done and a hunger satisfied. You stand and carry your bowl to the wash basin. You move with a slow, heavy grace, your body beginning to acknowledge the fatigue of the long watch. But there is one final task before you can seek your own rest. You move to the desk and open the logbook. The leather cover is cool and supple. You take up your quill and dip it into the inkwell. 0600 a.m. Light extinguished. Weights wound. Lantern curtains drawn, porridge taken. The morning is clear and cold. The sea is moderate. All is well in the house of the light. You blot the ink with the fine sand, the grains whispering as they slide across the parchment. You close the book. The sound is a soft, final thump. You look around the kitchen one last time. The fire is burning steadily. The kettle is humming. The shadows are long and peaceful. You move toward the small bedroom tucked behind the kitchen, where the bed is made with thick wool blankets and a pillow stuffed with the down of sea ducks. You pull off your heavy boots, the leather hitting the floor with two distinct, solid thuds. You remove your pilot coat and hang it on its peg. You climb into the bed, the blankets feeling heavy and cool at first, then rapidly warming to your body heat. You sink into the mattress, your muscles finally, completely relaxing. You close your eyes. The last thing you hear is the rhythmic ticking of the clock in the next room, a heartbeat that will continue to count the seconds of the day while you sleep, ensuring that the rhythm of the light and the rhythm of the life remain unbroken. The small bedroom tucked into the curve of the lighthouse cottage is a sanctuary of profound, muffled stillness. You lie beneath the weight of 3 heavy wool blankets, their fibers dense and comforting, pressing down upon you with a gentle, grounding force. The air in the room is cool, a sharp contrast to the warmth radiating from your own body trapped within the layers of bedding. You can feel the tip of your nose, the only part of you exposed to the ambient air, growing slightly chilled, while the rest of your form is encased in a private, tropical microclimate. The pillow beneath your head is filled with the softest down of sea ducks, gathered during the summer months. It yields slowly to the weight of your skull, contouring perfectly to your temple. The light in the room is dim, a soft, filtered gray that leaks in through the cracks around the heavy oak door leading to the kitchen. It is the light of midday, but here in your subterranean-like chamber, It feels like an eternal twilight. You are not fully asleep, nor are you fully awake. You are suspended in that heavy, liminal state of the day sleeper, where the boundaries of the self seem to blur into the environment. You listen to the house. Even in your half-conscious state, your ears are tuned to the specific frequency of the lighthouse. You hear the rhythmic, distant ticking of the regulator clock in the kitchen tock, click, tock, click. It is a heartbeat that exists outside of yourself, a constant reminder of the steady progression of the universe. Occasionally, there is a low, moaning sound from the tower, the wind catching the ventilation cowls far above. It is a lonely, musical note, a deep that vibrates through the granite walls and into the frame of your bed. You feel it more than you hear it, a resonant frequency that settles into your bones. The silence is punctuated by the tiny, domestic sounds of the house settling in the cold. A floorboard in the kitchen gives a sharp, dry snap as the wood contracts. A piece of soot falls down the chimney, landing in the hearth with a microscopic thud. These sounds do not startle you. They are the familiar vocabulary of your home, a series of predictable events that reinforce your sense of security. You pull the blankets higher, tucking the top edge under your chin. The wool smells faintly of cedar, lavender, and the salt air that permeates everything on this island. It is a nourishing scent, the smell of a life well-ordered and carefully maintained. As the hours of the afternoon pass, the light in the room shifts almost imperceptibly. The gray turns to a pale, dusty gold as a stray beam of winter sun finds a gap in the exterior shutters. You watch a single mote of dust as it dances in this sliver of light. It rises and falls on an invisible current of air, a tiny silver speck performing a slow, chaotic ballet. You track its movement with heavy eyelids, mesmerized by its aimless, graceful journey. 1, 2, 3. It sinks. 4. 5, 6. It rises again. The world is reduced to this single, illuminated particle. Eventually, the internal clock of the keeper begins to stir. You have slept for nearly 7 hours, a deep and dreamless slumber that has restored the reserves of your spirit. You do not wake with a start. You emerge from sleep like a diver slowly rising to the surface of a still pond. You become aware of the weight of your limbs, the slight stiffness in your neck, and the gradual return of your sensory focus. You lie still for a few minutes, savoring the final moments of warmth before you must face the chill of the room. You throw back the blankets. The sudden influx of cool air is a shock, a bracing, electric sensation that snaps your mind into clarity. You sit on the edge of the bed, your feet finding the braided rug on the floor. The texture is rough and nubby, stimulating the soles of your feet. You reach for your clothes, which you laid out neatly on a wooden stool before retiring. Each layer is a ritual. First, the long underwear of thick, ribbed cotton. It is soft and slightly fuzzy on the inside, clinging to your skin with a comforting snugness. Next, the heavy wool trousers, their fabric stiff and durable. You feel the weight of them as you pull them up, the suspenders clicking into place over your shoulders. Then the flannel shirt, patterned in a muted weave of forest green and charcoal gray. You button it from the bottom up, your fingers moving with a practiced, rhythmic precision. Click, click, click. Finally, the heavy knit sweater, a garment so thick it could almost stand on its own. You pull it over your head. the wool scratching briefly against your ears before settling around your torso like a warm embrace. You step into the kitchen. The room is quiet and peaceful, the fire in the stove having burned down to a gentle, pulsing bed of embers. The air is still and smells of dry wood and the faint, lingering aroma of your morning porridge. You move to the window and scrape a small circle in the frost. The sun is low in the southwest, a pale, lemon-colored disk hanging just above the horizon. The sky is a clear, cold azure, transitioning into a bruised purple in the east. The day is nearly over, and your work is about to begin. But first, there is the midday inspection of the island. This is a task that must be performed regardless of the weather, a way of ensuring that the foundations of your world remain intact. You pull on your heavy leather boots, lacing them tight to protect your ankles. You take up your pilot coat and cap and step out the heavy oak door. The cold hits you with a physical force, a dry, searing breath that makes the moisture in your nostrils freeze instantly. The snow on the ground is deep and drifted, sculpted by the wind into elegant, undulating waves. It is not a soft, powdery snow. It is a hard, crystalline crust that supports your weight for a half second before giving way with a loud, satisfying crump. You walk toward the oil shed, located 50 yards from the main tower. Every step is an effort. Crump, crunch, slide. The sound of your boots in the frozen snow is the only noise in the stillness. You look at the lighthouse from this perspective. It is a magnificent, lonely monument of stone, its whitewashed surface gleaming like bone against the darkening sky. The lantern room at the top is a crown of glass, the heavy linen curtains you drew this morning still in place, protecting the lens from the sun. From down here, the tower looks immovable, an ancient part of the geology of the island. You reach the oil shed, a small, sturdy structure built of the same granite as the tower. The door is heavy and reinforced with iron bands. You clear a small drift of snow from the threshold with the side of your boot, the ice making a dry, shushing sound as it slides across the stone. You unlock the door, the iron key turning with a heavy, frozen resistance. Inside, the shed is dim and smells powerfully of whale oil, a thick, fatty, prehistoric scent. You count the barrels. They sit in long, orderly rows, their iron hoops glinting in the low light. These barrels are your lifeblood. Without them, the light goes dark. You walk down the row, tapping each one with your gloved knuckle. Thud, thud, thud. The sound is deep and solid, confirming that your supplies are ample for the remaining months of winter. You check the seals on the bungs, ensuring no moisture has penetrated the oil. Everything is in its place. The order of the shed is a reflection of the order of your mind. You step back outside and close the door, the heavy latch clicking into place with a definitive metallic sound. You decide to walk to the northern edge of the island, where the rocks meet the open sea. As you move, you notice the tracks of a single snowy owl that must have landed here during your sleep. The prints are delicate and sharp, like fine calligraphy on the white page of the snow. You follow them for a few yards before they vanish into a flurry of wing beats recorded in the drift. The northern ledges are encrusted with ice, a thick, translucent armor that has been built up by weeks of freezing spray. The ice is not smooth. It is a chaotic landscape of frozen splashes, jagged spears, and rounded hummocks. You stand a safe distance from the edge, watching the swells. The ocean is a deep, bruised indigo, the waves moving with a slow, heavy power. When a wave hits the rocks, there is no sharp crash. Instead, there is a deep, subsonic boom that you feel in your chest. A plume of white spray rises high into the air, catching the last rays of the sun and turning into a spray of liquid gold before falling back into the dark water. You watch this for a long time. Boom, rise, fall, boom, rise, fall. The rhythm is ancient and indifferent. It does not care about the lighthouse or the oil or the keeper. It only cares about the relentless movement of the energy across the void. You feel a sense of profound humility in the face of this power, but you also feel a deep, quiet strength. You are the one who has built a house of stone in the middle of this chaos. You are the one who maintains the light that guides the way through it. You begin the walk back to the cottage. The sun has finally dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a narrow ribbon of burning orange and deep crimson. The rest of the sky is a deep, velvety violet, transitioning into the blackness of the coming night. The stars are beginning to emerge, pinpricks of cold fire in the vast, black dome of the sky. As you reach the cottage door, you stop to clear the path. You take up your heavy iron shovel, the metal cold and substantial in your hands. You begin to clear the drift that has formed against the stone step. Shh, clack. The sound of the shovel against the granite is a sharp, rhythmic percussion. You move with a slow, steady pace, your muscles warming with the exertion. You focus on the geometry of the task, creating a clean, square path through the chaotic white of the snow. Each shovelful of snow is a weight, a physical thing that you lift and toss aside. You watch as the crystals catch the fading light, looking like scattered diamonds. Once the path is clear, you return inside. The warmth of the kitchen is like a physical embrace. You hang your coat and cap on their pegs and remove your boots. You move to the stove and stir the coals, adding 2 fresh logs of seasoned oak. The wood catches quickly, the flames licking at the bark with a soft, crackling sound. You take a seat at the table. It is nearly time to begin the ascent for the night watch. You sit in the silence for a moment, listening to the house. The regulator clock continues its steady, unhurried count. Tock, click, tock, click. You feel a sense of deep, quiet anticipation. The night is coming and you are ready. The cycle is beginning again, a predictable, monotonous, and perfectly beautiful loop of duty and peace. You reach for your logbook, the leather cover cool and smooth. You take up your quill and prepare to make the midday entry. 1600, woke from sleep, air clear and cold. Island inspection complete, oil stores verified, snowy owls sighted on the northern drift. Sea is heavy from the NE, preparing to light the lamp. All remains well. You blot the ink and close the book. The sound is a soft, final thud. You stand and move toward the tower door, the brass keys clinking at your waist. The transition has been made. The sleeper has become the keeper once more. You step into the cool, damp air of the stone shaft and begin the first climb of the night, your heart beating in time with the rhythm of the light that is about to wake. The sun, a pale and exhausted orb of wintry gold, hangs suspended just inches above the jagged black teeth of the western horizon. It is the final hour of the day's reprieve. Inside the keeper's cottage, the air is thick and still, warmed by the steady, low-burning heartbeat of the cast-iron stove. You stand in the center of the kitchen, your boots laced tight, your heavy wool sweater settling comfortably against your shoulders. You take a moment to simply exist in the silence. The regulator clock on the wall provides the only rhythm, tock, click, a sound so constant it has become the background radiation of your consciousness. You look at the table, where a single stray grain of oats from your morning meal rests on the dark pine. You reach out and brush it away with a slow, deliberate motion of your thumb. The wood is cool and smooth. Everything is ready. The transition is beginning. You pick up your heavy brass key ring. The keys are cold, substantial, and familiar in your palm. As you move toward the tower door, the metal clinks with a dull, melodic chime, a sound that signals the end of your rest and the beginning of your vigilance. You open the heavy oak door. The air from the tower shaft rushes out to meet you, cool, damp, and smelling of ancient granite and the faint, metallic tang of the iron stairs. You step across the threshold, and the heavy door closes behind you with a solid, definitive thud that echoes upward into the darkness of the spiral. The climb is a moving meditation. You do not rush. You place each foot precisely in the center of the stone steps, feeling the slight concave wear in the granite, the physical record of the thousands of times you and the keepers before you have made this journey. Step. The sound of your leather sole on the stone is a deep, resonant hollow. Step. You run your hand along the wall. The lime wash is slightly textured like a fine-grained sandstone. Step. You count the steps, not out of necessity but for the comfort of the sequence. 42, 43, 44. By the time you reach the upper gallery, your breathing has synchronized with your pace, deep and steady. You enter the lantern room. It is dim and amber-hued, the heavy linen curtains still drawn tight against the day's sun. The air is warm and smells of linseed oil and beeswax. You move to the first curtain. You grip the edge of the heavy fabric. It is coarse and cool to the touch. You pull. Sure. The brass rings slide along the rail with a dry, rhythmic rasp. As the curtain parts, a flood of pale, horizontal light pours into the room, illuminating the thousands of tiny dust motes that dance in the still air. They swirl in a slow, chaotic ballet, caught in the transition between the dark and the light. You move to the next curtain, and the next, until the entire perimeter of the lantern room is revealed. The world outside is a study in twilight. The sky is a deep, bruised violet in the east, transitioning into a burning, crystalline orange in the west. The ocean is a vast sheet of undulating pewter, the swells moving with a heavy, unhurried power. You look at the horizon, a sharp, clear line where the water meets the sky. There is no land in sight, only the infinite expanse of the Atlantic. You feel a sense of immense, peaceful solitude. You are the only living soul for miles, a tiny point of consciousness suspended between the sky and the sea. Now you turn your attention to the great Fresnel lens. It stands in the center of the room, a magnificent, silent cathedral of glass and brass. You take a soft chamois cloth from your supply basket. You begin at the lower tier of prisms. You move the cloth in a slow, circular motion, polishing the glass until it is so clear it seems to vanish. Hiss. The sound of the leather against the glass is a soft, rhythmic friction. You watch the way the twilight is refracted through the prisms, creating tiny, flickering rainbows that dance across your hands and the floor. You move around the circumference of the lens, your boots making a soft scuff on the iron plating. You check every facet, every brass bolt, every drop of oil in the roller bearings. The machine is perfect. It is a masterpiece of human ingenuity, waiting for the touch of the flame to bring it to life. You move to the lamp assembly. You unscrew the heavy brass cap of the reservoir. You take your measuring dipstick, a thin sliver of polished cedar, and lower it into the oil. Drip, drip, drip. The oil is thick and translucent like liquid honey. The level is exactly where it should be. You take a clean linen rag and wipe the threads of the cap before replacing it. You tighten it until you feel the resistance of the leather gasket. Thunk. It is secure. Now the wicks. You take your brass trimming shears. They are heavy and cool in your hand. You open the blades, snip, snip, the sound crisp and precise. You carefully remove the charred tip from each of the concentric wicks. You work with the delicacy of a surgeon, ensuring the edge is perfectly level. Even the smallest irregularity would cause the flame to smoke, and smoke is the enemy of the light. You collect the tiny black fragments of charred cotton in a small tin cup, their scent sharp and acrid. It is time. The sun has finally slipped below the horizon, leaving only a fading ribbon of crimson to mark its passage. The stars are beginning to emerge, pinpricks of cold fire in the deepening indigo. You reach into your pocket and find your matchbox, a small, sliding box of thin wood. You pull it open. The matches are long and tipped with a bulbous head of dark red phosphorus. You take one out, feeling the texture of the wood grain against your fingertips. You strike the match against the side of the box. Scritch flare. The sudden burst of light is brilliant and jarring in the dim room. The smell of sulfur is sharp and nostalgic. You hold the flame to the wicks. They catch slowly, the fire creeping across the fabric until a steady, golden glow begins to emanate from the lamp. You adjust the air intake, turning a small brass wheel. The flame responds, growing taller and wider until it reaches the precise focal point of the lens. The lantern room is suddenly filled with a warm, living light that casts long, rotating shadows against the glass. You move to the clockwork mechanism. You take the heavy iron winding handle and fit it onto the arbor. Clack, clack, clack. The sound is a deep, rhythmic percussion that echoes through the tower. You wind the weights high into the shaft, feeling the resistance of gravity in your muscles. You wind until you feel the tension reach its peak. You remove the handle and set the brake. With a low, grinding groan of metal on metal, the massive lens begins to move. It glides on its bed of mercury and rollers with a ghostly, effortless grace. The rotation begins. 1, 2, 3. The great beam of light sweeps across the room, illuminating the brass fittings, the glass panes, and your own steady hands before reaching out miles across the dark water. 10, 11, 12. The shadows return, a cool, rhythmic darkness that prepares the eye for the next flash. You stand in the center of the room, watching the light. It is a pulse, a breath, a heartbeat. It is the promise that the night will be kept. You watch as the beam catches the first few snowflakes of the evening, tiny, glittering diamonds that appear for a microsecond before vanishing into the void. The rhythm is hypnotic. You find yourself counting the seconds in the silence. 1, 2, 3. Light. 1, 2, 3. Shadow. You take your seat on the wooden stool. Your work is done for the moment. The wicks are burning, the oil is flowing, the gears are turning, and the light is sweeping. You pull your collar up around your neck, feeling the warmth of the lamp against your face. You look out at the horizon. The ocean is now a vast, black mystery, broken only by the rhythmic white flash of your own light reflecting off the distant swells. You feel a sense of profound, unshakable peace. The world is small, contained within this circle of glass and stone. It is a world of simple tasks and rhythmic sounds. It is a world where monotony is a blessing and boredom is a form of prayer. You listen to the sounds of the night, the low hum of the wind through the cowls, the distant, rhythmic boom of the surf against the ledges far below, the steady, mechanical tick-tick-tick of the rotation governor. These sounds weave together into a tapestry of silence, a wall of white noise that protects you from the complexities of the world beyond the waves. You are the keeper of the 1840s. You are the sentinel of the coast. You are the unblinking eye of the North Atlantic. As the first hour of your watch passes, you feel the heaviness of the night beginning to settle into your bones. It is not a fatigue of the body, but a quietude of the mind. Your thoughts have become slow and fluid, like the oil in the reservoir. You are no longer thinking about the day that has passed or the day that is to come. You are only thinking about the next rotation of the lens, the next tick of the clock, the next breath of the sea. The lighthouse tower stands firm against the cold and the dark. The granite blocks, hand-hewn and perfectly fitted, hold back the immense pressure of the winter night. Inside, you are safe. You are warm. You are purposeful. You watch the light as it turns and turns and turns. A golden arm reaching out to touch the darkness, a steady pulse of human intent in the vast, indifferent universe. The night is long, but you are patient. You have everything you need. You have the oil, you have the wicks, and you have the silence. You settle back on your stool, your eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for the next sweep of the light to illuminate the dark. The clockwork ticks on. The wind hums its low, constant tune, and the great light breathes its steady, golden breath into the cold, silent air. The cycle is complete. The night is being kept. All is well. The end.